Good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for coming to our webinar. Today is the second webinar in the 2026 Spring Series, sponsored by NDE What Language, Chinese Language Teacher Association, Special Interest Group K-12, and also NEBLA. So today we have Dr. Erica Schauer with us. Thank you so much for doing this for us, Erica.
Yeah,
Take it
no
away, please.
problem. Yeah, so just a brief introduction for me. My name is Erica Schauer. I'm an associate professor of practice of French in the Department of Modern Languages at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I primarily teach, well, I don't want to say primarily teach language courses, but 3 courses in the fall, 3 in the spring, and 2 out of 3 of those are language courses. The third it tends to be in 19th century French literature and culture, although I stray from that from time to time. So, what I'll be sharing with everyone today, oh, we've got a friend entering the room. There we go. What I'll be sharing about today is going to be a little bit of kind of half and half, maybe 2/3, 1/3 actually. Um, the first portion will
Tomorrow
be
after school, you have
about
time
the work that I
to
did in August with the graduate teaching assistants in the Department of Modern Languages. Um, it was a workshop seminar trying to help our graduate teaching assistants become a little more familiarized with the um, pedagogy of comprehensible input and what new undergraduate students most likely had been seeing in their foreign language classrooms. And once I go through those 3 sessions, so the Monday session, the Wednesday session, and the Friday session, I'll then move on to talk about a current SOTL, so Scholarship of Learning and Teaching research project that I'm doing with the Center for Transformative Teaching at UNL on this same topic, but I'm doing a research project with my French 203 and French 204 students. So a bit past the required course sequence. So the first 2 courses, and at least in French, that students would take once they have completed the required courses. So these tend to be students that are thinking about pursuing a major or a minor, or who have some kind of interest in continuing on with the language. And we don't always get first year students in 203 and 204, but we get quite a few. So, okay, let me go ahead and get started with the actual material. Oh, you know what? I should have been projecting this while I told you what I was going to be doing. Here's what I'll be doing, which is what I just told you. So, walking you through some of the materials I used for the Orientation Week seminar, and going through the SOTL project that I'm doing. So, the first session that I did with my graduate students, sorry, let me just, there we go. That'll be a little bit more helpful for me if I just, sorry, I'm hiding the big ribbon of people so I don't have to keep moving that around. The first session that I did on the Monday of orientation week with the graduate teaching assistants was mostly centered around just making sure students knew what comprehensible input is and letting them know about the IPA, so the integrated program assessment. So we started that off with a little bit of CI, basically. I started off just by speaking in French. I'm torn. I kind of want to do that with all of you right now. But I might not. I think most of the instructors in this Zoom room are fairly well versed in comprehensible input as is. But basically what I did was I used comprehensible input to use my gestures, point at words, gesture to students who I know already speak French, and look at the students with the big eyes and see if I could get them to maybe pull out some meaning. And once I was thoroughly convinced that enough awkwardness was lingering in the room, I then switched to the new slide and kind of talked to them about what it was that we just did. Asked if anyone knew what comprehensible input is. Some people did actually know a little bit about comprehensible input. And so I was able to speak with those students about their definitions of comprehensible input, or what they were, or how they defined it in their own terms. Um, I asked if I did anything that went beyond CI, which I think I did actually. Well, let me see. How do I back up here? Mm, At any rate, some of the language that I used in the first slide there was not I+1, right? It was definitely not first day of class, um, super basic. It was certainly far advanced. So it definitely went beyond comprehensible input for a first day activity. And then I asked students to try and think, for the graduate students who were going to be teaching their very first classes 1 week beyond the Monday that we were meeting that day. I asked them to think if that was something that they did in their language classes in college, and if not, if perhaps they had done something like that in their high school classes. I then went on to go through what comprehensible input is. So kind of just a brief kind of crash course on CI for graduate students. The 5 hypotheses here: acquisition learning, monitor hypothesis, input hypothesis, effective filter hypothesis, and natural order hypothesis. I have to say the natural order hypothesis, that's still the one that kind of seems the most sticky, both to myself and to the students that I was working with. The other 4 seemed pretty digestible. Next time I do this orientation, I should actually write this down somewhere. Perhaps now is not the time. I had split students into new teaching assistants and returning teaching assistants. However, I should have labeled this first time teaching assistants and returning, or maybe a different word, but basically people who have taught before and people who haven't taught before. Because I did have quite a few, now that I think of it, people who were new to teaching for UNL, but who had come from a teaching background anyway. And that's mainly what I was getting at. But these discussion questions were mostly there to invite the students to think about either their own experiences in the classroom as language learners, or their experiences in the classroom as language instructors, and how they might have used, I didn't state explicitly, CI, but how they used behavior, speech patterns, gestures, visual aids to help their students understand for the GTAs who had taught before, or if they were language learners, to think about how their instructors used short version, comprehensible input to help them in understanding. The second round of discussion was very similar to the first round of discussion, but ways in which meaning was not communicated. So kind of maybe like failed attempts at communication. So for new GTAs, I asked them to reflect on times in the classroom where they did not understand what was going on, what they were doing, how they were maybe emotionally feeling, physically feeling, how they were relating to other students in the classroom, what they thought about themselves, and their own capacities in the language. If that had any effect on whether or not they thought they were going to continue with the language, what the experience of not understanding was physically, mentally, emotionally like for them. And then for the GTAs who had some kind of teaching experience in the past, I asked them to think about what was the physical, emotional, and mental experience for them on the other side of the blackboard. What does it feel like when you see your students struggling? Can you see when your student is feeling anxious, is feeling disconnected from other students, is feeling like, well, maybe I don't belong at this level of the language? And how does that make the instructor feel? What are the actions that those feelings kind of drive you to take? Just kind of brainstorming. What happens when we're in those situations? And then I ended the day, I believe, with the IPA, which was new for me when when I was creating this this workshop. I have a set of twins who are both taking French at Lincoln Southwest, and they would tell me about their French tests. And to my mind, since I'm so old, I was like, oh, great, how'd it go? And they're like, well, we did this part. They would say, you know, we did the comprehension part today. And I'm like, what? It wasn't computing for me. And so it really wasn't until I sat down and looked up, you know, the study that had been done with the national, with the Department of Education back in the early 2000s, and coming up with the IPA and teaching to the standards and all of this. This was all very new to me, and it was all very new to the graduate teaching assistants. And so I'm very glad that this information is now in the brains of the instructors who will come into contact with first year language students at UNL now. So we talked about the interpretive communication stage, the interpersonal communication stage, and the presentational communication stage. I explained a little bit more about what that means, what each of the different tasks means. And then at the end, I asked them to, between the end of the session on Monday and the beginning of the session on Wednesday, to kind of think about what all students like to try and put themselves in the mind of a first year student and what is going to really stand out as different for the first year student coming into the college classroom. I also told them I gave them a discussion question, knowing that in their orientation week schedule, they're going to be meeting with, sorry, I didn't do my tense properly. I was just thinking in French there, it should have been the futur antérieur. They will have met with Kelly. So that's Kelly Kingsbury Brunetto. She is the coordinator of the language, the required language courses in Spanish. Catherine does French and Jana does German. So between the Monday of orientation week and the Wednesday of orientation week, the graduate teaching assistants know a little bit, they learn a little bit more about, what's on, they see the syllabus of the course that they're teaching. They see some of the lesson plans, I think, of the course that they're teaching. They might even see, some teaching examples by Kelly, Katrine, and Jana. And so they're better able to kind of get an idea of what the classroom experience might look like. So I asked them to think about what might be different, new, challenging, or anxiety producing for them. Okay, so that covers Monday. Then on Wednesday, we talk about comprehensible output and the communicative classroom at UNL. So we talk more on Monday about what goes on in high school with CI. And here we're talking about CO, which is slightly different and tends to map a little bit more directly onto the post-secondary FL classroom. So I'm very discussion question oriented in my teaching. So I start off with discussion questions, asking them, do they think that whether or not the university classroom experience is going to be the same kind of experience? If so, how so? Because there are quite a few similarities. If not, what are some differences? Then I asked them to reflect on the differences in assessment. So how is the IPA different from the college unit exam, for example? And what about the unit exam, again, might be quite intimidating for a CI prepared student. And finally, I asked them to think about Krashen's hypotheses and whether or not the college level classroom focuses on acquisition or learning, on input or output. And what about the effective filter hypothesis? Do we in the college classroom tend to want to make sure that the student is always feeling happy, joyous, and free? Or do we leave a little bit of leeway for I'll get to that. I might be giving a bit of a spoiler there, actually, in the way that I'm posing the question. After that round of discussion questions, I move straight into Merrill Swain. And I talk about the 3 SLA traits of Merrill Swain. So the second language acquisition traits of Merrill Swain. So she was a Canadian applied linguist. So she talks about the grammatical trait, the discourse trait. So that is placing actions in, so verb tenses basically, and picking up on anaphoric cues. So being able to pick up on things that we have referred to previously in conversation by the use of pronouns, things like that, and sociolinguistic traits. So for an example in French would be the distinction between the tu versus the vous. when to use forms of politeness, when to, like, the different registers of language, when those different things are appropriate, things like that. Next, I move on to talking about a pretty famous study that Meryl Swain did, and I actually called this the immersion paradox. But this particular study that I talk about from Meryl Swain it's pretty old now, but it's where she ran a series of tests in a Canadian French immersion school. This was with students in the 6th grade. So that is to say, these students had been receiving comprehensible input for immersion style comprehensible input for 7 years. And she found that with regards to the discursive trait and the sociolinguistic trait, there was really no distinguishable difference with regards to acquisition. But when it came to the grammatical trait, there really was a statistically significant disadvantage. Whoops. Oh no. I moved forward and now I really don't remember how to move back because, oh, there it goes. I did it. There was a disadvantage when they were compared to their native speaker peer groups. So I asked students for a while to think about how or why that would be. So I don't remember if I say it here. Nope, I don't. I do say it on the next slide. One important factor to note with Swain's study is that Swain's whole point was to try and test the limits of the input hypothesis and the acquisition learning hypothesis in particular. So toward the end of Swain's study, when she's, kind of wrapping up and coming to her conclusions, she brings up two assumptions that Krashen makes that she kind of pushes back on. So the two assumptions are, one, that it is in the exchanges themselves in which meaning is negotiated that are facilitative to grammatical acquisition as a result of comprehensible input. The second assumption is that the key facilitator is input rather than output. And I do go into these quite a bit more. So because to me, this all is very heavy language. So let me break it down a little bit more. So she goes on to say that the assumption that it's the exchanges, so it's the receiving of language that facilitates the receiving of grammatical structures, that we can somehow use comprehensible input to then sort of eventually divine the structures of language. It's that assumption of Krashen that doesn't sit right with her. The reason being, for Swain, she says that assumes that, and here I'm kind of going on to the second line of this second paragraph here. It assumes that a learner can pay attention to the meaning and the form or the structure or the grammar of language at the same time. And she says, I'm not sure if I buy that. That seems unlikely or rather difficult. What seems more likely to Swain is that once you can understand the substance of the message, once you can understand, then you can move on to pay closer attention to the structure. So breaking that down even further, what that means for us as K-12 and post-secondary educators is that comprehensible input, that understanding of the substance of a message, is essential in the early stages of language learning and of language exposure. However, according to this immersion paradox that Swain came across in her study, that doesn't necessarily mean that students are going to pick up on the form. And that, yes, language acquisition can happen, but language learning still needs to happen. And that's what we tend to do at the university level. So, and that's the marked difference. That is the thing that stands out as, oh, what are we doing here? As anxiety producing, as not as fun, as kind of, I think it's fun. I don't know. Don't get me started. I think it's a grand old time, but I might be in the minority. But it's definitely different from what CI does. So 3 points here. Number one, comprehensible input is an indispensable stepping stone for understanding language, so understanding the message. Number two, it's a stepping stone to language learning. So we have to also teach the form, the grammatical structures that students can then use to go on later on in their language journey to do things at the higher level language courses when they get to their major. In, for example, I had a wonderful class last semester with students and talking about World War I, and we were talking about very difficult, rich texts that really you can't just, with no grammar to speak of, come up with hard things to say about Proust. Or I mean, there were some, it was some hard stuff that we were talking about, and to get to that level of expression, sometimes there are the stepping stones that we need. And so that is what we do in post-secondary education. So, you know, that was that was assumption number two, is that the key facilitator for Krashen is input rather than output. So that's the second bone to pick of Swain. She cites a 9th grade immersion student who told her about what happens when he uses French. He said, quoting the student here, "I understand everything anyone says to me, and I can hear it in my head how I should sound when I talk, but it never comes out that way." And I've had uncountable experiences with incoming students who tell me after the first day of class, "I understand everything you said, and I'm not sure if I'm in the right class, because when you broke us out into groups, I didn't know what to say." And so I'm very excited to, you know, do these bridge activities that we'll talk about here in a minute, because I think it'll really help. The second point from Swain here is the phenomenon of individuals who can understand language, yet can only produce limited utterances in it. They had just never got around to a syntactic analysis of the language because there has been no demand on them to produce the language. So that's the second part of what we do in post-secondary classroom that differs from the K-12 classroom. So that is not to say that K-12 classrooms aren't practicing communicative learning. It's just to say that in the college classroom, it's almost, I don't want to say all discussion questions, all students are speaking, but it's mostly that. It's mostly talking about form and giving students the opportunity to practice speaking an awful lot. So it is quite the change from one style to the next. I then go on to tell them a little bit more about Swain's comprehensible output theory. So the noticing function, where the learner encounters a gap between what they want to say and what they can say. Hypothesis testing function, where the learner says something, tests it out, and kind of checks to see what the listener response is, gets feedback, and then based on the feedback, metalinguistic function to see how am I going to repeat the cycle. Couple more discussion questions. I asked them to think about the differences between CI and CO. And then I have a question to consider before Wednesday. What do they think the primary causes of stress for the CI prepared student might be coming into a college level classroom for the first time? In the Friday session, it's a lot more just introducing the GTAs to activities they can do with their students throughout the semester to help students who are CI trained to kind of transition them into the more output focused classroom, so that we don't just expect students to be okay with speaking all the time. So let me get to, oh, I do ask GTAs to familiarize students with the proficiency pyramid and talk to them very kind of openly about the distance between where their language level is, perhaps novice, mid, novice, high, intermediate, low, intermediate, mid in the target language, and where their language level in their native language will be as an adult learner at the university level. And to talk to them about the discomfort, the kind of grading feeling that they might have, where they in their other courses might be able to express themselves in very high level ways. And then they get to their language course, and here's their French professor asking them if they prefer cats to dogs. And that might be quite a grading experience for them, but that it's normal, and that's just what learning feels like. So then I go through some of the bridge activities. So classroom community building activities, student choice and participation levels. So in their discussion groups, they can be either primary speaker if they're quite comfortable with speaking in the target language already, perhaps note taker if they're not quite there, but they are comfortable with written language, or if they're very, very uncomfortable, observer even. And then as the semester progresses, ask students to then switch roles within their groups. Error-friendly activities, so explicitly framing some activities as we're just going to make as many mistakes as we need to and write them on the board so that we can learn from them, right? Explicitly saying we want to know what the mistakes are that we're making because we want to not make them on the quiz, on our compositions. Just this is how we learn. I really like this one, mistake celebration rituals. I think that's kind of fun. Structured pair work with scaffolding. So clear prompts, sentence frames, vocabulary support. However, with removing these scaffolding, with removing the scaffolds throughout the semester, is key because these won't always be there as they move through their coursework at the university level. Peer coaching partnerships, peer interviewing projects, role playing with a little bit of preparation time, and then a little bit less, and then a little bit less. Progressive group sizes, so starting in pairs, then groups of 3, groups of 4, whole class activities. The infamous information gap activity, fishbowl observations. I haven't tried this one yet, but I think it sounds kind of fun. Have a small group of students demonstrate communicative activity while others observe, and self-assessment and reflection routines. I did try this a couple of semesters ago. I might bring it back every other quiz to see how it goes, but I don't know. I couldn't tell if the students were seeing it as an opportunity or as busy work, so I'll have to see. Think, pair, share, gallery walks with peer feedback, collaborative storytelling, and finally problem solving with clear outcomes. Okay. I've only got 20 minutes left. I know there are students in here who've got to be cracking up who have had me before because I do this every time. I know I'm supposed to leave time for questions and I always talk too long. Anyway, okay, so my SOTL project. This is going on this semester. This semester just started on Monday, but the title is Bridging the Gap, Creating Post-Secondary Foreign Language Classrooms for the Comprehensible Input Prepared First-Year Language Student. It's quite a mouthful. But the purpose is essentially what I've been telling you about this whole time. It's essentially addressing that pain point, that pressure point of students coming from the CI classroom going into the university classroom. And it's kind of looking at it from various angles. Because let's be honest, we're also having enrollment problems, not just at UNL, but across the country in language programs. And so every little bit helps, I would like to think. If we're losing students due to anxiety, or just basic teaching method things, then why not? Why not? We're going to give it a shot. So, number one, it aligns with national priorities, both with the ACTFL and other professional organizations by focusing on proficiency, emphasis on equity and inclusion, research-informed practice, and diverse instructional approaches. And it focuses on higher education trends. So student success and retention, evidence-based teaching, focus on first-year experience, and value placed on SOTL research. My favorite part is it focuses on the students. Again, as I mentioned at the top, I spend pretty much 2/3 of my professional life with students who are in 203 and 204. Not all of them are first-year students, but quite a few are. And it pains me when I see the students who tend to sit in the back and they tend to get really big eyes, and I tend to not see them past week 1 because they get intimidated and leave. So I'm thinking of the student who loved French in high school, felt very confident, was excited to come to college, and then shows up, looks around, and says, okay, no, I was wrong. Maybe it was just high school French. Maybe it was just my high school teacher who was lovely. I really miss the games that we used to play. I thought it would be different. It's not for me. I thought I was better. So I want to know how many students feel this. I want to know how we can recognize that student, see that student, help that student, and fix this. So that that's my goal. The methodology here is to take, there's a early survey, every other week survey, and an exit survey. And then of course I'll be implementing the bridge activities that I just went over to see what effect, if any, this has on our students. So fingers crossed. I'll also be doing a lot of outreach with regards to study abroad, internships, all that, but that's not part of this study. So here is the the opening survey that one of my classes, so I remembered to pass the survey out yesterday in class. 203 will do it tomorrow because I did not remember. So they have two or three sections. Here's section 1, background and prior experience. So question number 1, how would you describe your high school French learning experience? Check all that apply. So we learned through stories, conversations, and listening activities. We memorized verb conjugation charts and grammar rules. We focused on understanding French without much speaking. We practiced grammar exercises and translations. We learned by doing activities entirely in French, and then other. And question number 2, in your high school French classes, how often did you memorize grammar rules, practice conversations, complete grammar worksheets, or listen to French stories? That's right, there are 3 sections. So section 2 is current confidence or anxiety. Right now, how confident do you feel about understanding French grammar rules, speaking French in class, continuing French studies? And how anxious do you feel about university level French? And the final one is intentions. How likely are you to take French next semester? So the quick biweekly check-ins, I have 3 sets of questions that I will do every 2 weeks, but I'm kind of rotating these questions so they're not answering the same ones all of the time. So question set A that they will answer on weeks 3 and 9. How confident did you feel in French class this week? So from 1 to 5. 1 being not very confident, 5 being very confident. And how likely are you to continue French next semester? 1, not very likely, 5, very likely. Set B, weeks 5 and 11. How well are you understanding the grammar explanations? And how similar do this week's lessons feel to your previous French experience? And then set C, how comfortable do you feel participating in class? 1 word to describe your French learning this week. And then there's an open-ended exit survey with questions that had been used previously, but several of them are open-ended. So that is all I have. Ready for any questions if anyone has anything for me. Or not is the other option. The suspense is thrilling.
Hi, Erika.
Hey Sylvia, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for your speech. It was amazing.
Oh, thanks.
Uh, I love it. And for me, it's very interesting because I come from a system of education which is like super different. Like I come from Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
I have like different courses, like for instance, when you're doing a major in a language or when you're just like learning a language, which
Mm-hmm.
makes it a little bit different
Yeah.
because like I feel like a UNL or like an American university. It's just different. Like
Oh yeah.
everyone is in the same pot, if I can say.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So it was very interesting for me uh how to navigate a little bit like from, as you said, like probably more like perceptive
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
bilingualism,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
to like more like output.
Yeah.
Uh, because like in when I was in Colombia, it was like both of them. So I just like want to know
Yeah.
more about your experience, like because it's a total different system of education. So I know
Mm-hmm.
you're conducting research about it, but it was just like something that really caught my attention.
Yeah. Well, and I think even just ooh, now we're doing all of the syllables generationally. For me, I think the adoption of comprehensible input was after my time because I'm old and that's new. So, um, when I was coming up, so I was learning French mostly in the mid 90s is when I started. So that was when I was in middle school. High school, I graduated in 99, and so I did my undergrad, so like 2000 to 2004. And I think 2004 was when like the IPA started rolling out and all of that. So I was still on kind of the old school, um, not necessarily like, here is the grammar rule, now practice it, but um, kind of what I imagine you teach like. I don't actually know if you guys do the same thing in Spanish, but where we present students with some target language media that's fairly short, and then we highlight some new language structures for them, and we ask them, what do you notice about this structure? And see if they might be able to say, like, if we're doing the time, what do you notice about the way that they say 2:30 in Spanish? How do you think they might say 2:40? So that they try to figure out the grammar rule themselves before we say, that's right, not quite, and then give them the grammar rule and then they practice some more. So that was kind of the way that I kind of was formed as a language speaker. And so I actually learned about CI pedagogically um, from my colleagues in the world languages department at LPS and in other districts, and from my stepkids. I was like, "You're doing what? What is this? What's going on?" Um, so yeah, it's it's been a wild ride, man. It's all very different. Yeah. So I think it's really important for different ways of language learning and acquisition to be talked about, because if all of these different pedagogies come together in university spaces, because everybody comes from different places and we're all here together trying to figure it out. Yeah. So,
And there was another question that I had, like how you manage like even like comprehensive input when you have like so many backgrounds. Like me, I'm learning French, but I'm a Spanish speaker. How you
mhm.
do like how you manage to like kind of like solve that challenging when you're like teaching or like?
hmm hmm Well, how do you mean? Actually, can you rephrase your question?
Yeah, the thing is that you were saying like about comprehensive input, how like students can like all understand like the meaning before like learning any form. So I was thinking like, okay, like when students like come from different backgrounds, especially in the United
Yeah.
States with all like migration,
Yeah.
and they'll have like different backgrounds, like they say like the mother tongue. Like so how you
How
kind
do
of
you, if it's
you're
not the
able
same
to
mother tongue?
provide comprehensible input for all of those backgrounds. Like have you have that experience like in your teaching, how you like handle it?
hmm So I definitely have, because yeah, I've had students who don't speak English as their first language at all. I've had quite a few. Um, and I can say that since comprehensible input hasn't really ever been the way that I deliver course materials myself, um, I don't have much advice for you on delivering content with comprehensible input. Um, for multiple, I would presume, although if anyone on here who is well versed in content delivery with comprehensible input has anything to say, I would presume it would be fairly consistent across different native languages, because as far as I understand, the idea behind comprehensible input is more using visual cues and gestures as opposed to, and kind of avoiding just giving a word to word translation, right? As opposed to showing tasks and then showing the word cup. I mean, this is a really big task to begin with. I don't even know if I would call this a task in French. But showing the object would be an example so that whomever the whoever is receiving the visual input presumably would then associate it with their own native language. Sorry, I saw a question. After you did the survey, would you follow the similar teaching pattern that the students would you follow the similar teaching pattern that the students shared with you, or students' responses can vary? I'm not sure if I understand the question fully in the chat. It says, after you did the survey, would you follow the similar teaching pattern that students shared with you? Do you mean to say, would I then adjust my teaching based on survey responses? I'm not sure if that's the
Yeah, I think she might,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what I tend to do in general. I'm very responsive to my course evaluations, uh, which has been the bane of my existence. I'm very sensitive. So usually I don't know that I've ever taught the same course twice without some kind of adjustment based on responses and feedback that I get from my students. So yes, absolutely. If I get feedback in these responses that say nothing that I'm doing is helping, um, yeah, I'll have to find a different approach. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or reach out to my high school friends and say, please, will you introduce them to a grammar, please? What else?
Any other questions? It seems we don't have any more questions. Thank you,
Okay.
Erica. This is great.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Yeah. All right, everybody, have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Ciao,
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Erika.
Thank you.